All right, we are on page 214. We got some people coming on Zoom, so just give me 1 sec and we'll get started. Hello, everybody on Zoom. Hello, everybody in person. We're going to start on page 214 with Ashrei. 214. Ashrei Ashrei ve'techa delu chazel, Ashrei Hashem shikacha lo, Ashrei Am shadonai lo avti la leDavid, Aramim kol hayam melech, Arachashi chadam ve'b'choim varecheka. פותח את ידיך, משפיע לכל חי רצון, צדיק עלי בדרך, חסיד בכל מצב, גרם לחבר בכל שקר עובר, צריך להישב את המשומר לטוב. תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, יברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעם ועד, ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה. ובא לציון גואל, שווה פשע ויעקב, נאמן עליהם על הזיז רביתי אותם עליי. קשר לך ברשת אביך למושביך ביזרח מזר זכר מרן מדברנתק. ואתה קדוש ישבתי לו ישראל וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך על הארץ כבודו. ותישאני רוח ואשמע אחרי קול רעש גדול ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני מחותקם לעולם עליהם. אדוני אלוהי ואמצעו, ותן שומר זה לאמץ וחשבון ויפתחו בך יודעי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר. יגדל ויקדש שמי רבה, ויעמד דברי קירותי, וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון ויומכון, וחיי לכל בית ישראל, מגלה בזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רב מברך, לעולם ולעלמיה, יברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויזרום ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל, שמי לקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה, ושירתה, תשבחתה, ונחמתה, דמירן מעלמה, ואמרו אמן. ואני תפילתי לך אדוני עת רצון, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, ענני באמת אישך. Okay, we don't get grandfathered in. Should I close the ark?
Yeah, but it's okay anyway, because we have to read out of a chumash anyway.
Oh, because we don't have a reader.
Right.
Cool. Sorry about that tease, everyone. Rats. Okay, so we are actually then just going to read the Parsha. You can be seated. I'm happy to do it. Give me a ring. Or we won't. I can just swing it. I'll just swing it. Well, you'll just tell. I'll just have it on the side. Okay, fine. We'll find him. We'll figure it out. He'll just help me. He'll have to help me. Okay, let's try that again. Let's open the ark again. This is a real roller coaster ride today. Vayivin Aaron, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha, v'yanusim esanecha mipanecha, Ki mitzion teitei Torah. V'dvarunai miYerushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah lo le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Gadlu et Adonai iti, uneroma ma shemo yachdav, lecha Adonai gedula, v'gravi tiferet v'netzach ve'od, ki chol v'shamayim.
So our Torah reader unfortunately could not be here today. So we are going to, or David is going to spot read from the Torah. Oh, you can put the Torah down.
Someone else knows Sav off the top of their heads. That's okay.
That's okay. This is how we haze our interns. We make them spot read. They can do it better than their rabbis. So.
6:13.
It's right here. Brian, do you want the first Leah?
Do we need a Gabbai Sheni? Sure. Okay. I think there's some words you. ותגלה ותראה מלכותו עלינו בזמן קרוב ויחום פליט ונפליט על עמו ישראל לכנו חסר רחמים ורצון ונאמר אמן הכל עבוד אלוהינו תוכבו לתורה. Take it over. Okay, well, it took long enough.
Baruch ben Chaim v'Hana.
Baruch ben Chaim v'Chana, Lili Arishon Baruch, Shatan Tolamai Savi Dushato.
אתם מדבקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום.
Vatem Yinachem, Haykochem, Hayom. It's the beginning of Parshat Tzav, page 613, I heard. It was over there.
No, it's up here.
Baruch et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch atah Adonai noteinu Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Tzav et Aaron v'et banav lemor. Zot Torat haolah hi haolah. Al mokedah, al mizbeach kol halayla. Ad haboker ve'esh hamizbeach tukadbo. V'lavash hakohen. Mido vad mikhnasei vad yilbash al besaro v'harim al hadeshen asher et hadeshen asher tochal ha'esh et olah al mizbeach ushmo etzel hamizbeach ushmo etzel hamizbeach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet b'chei olam atah b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noteinu Torah.
Amen. Shkoch. Second aliyah, who would like it? No? Second aliyah?
Okay, Gary. Yamad. Gershom ben Moshe v'Shoshana l'Aliyah Sheni. I'll give them the blessing.
Yeah. Oh. Well, here, they're on here. They're on here. Right there.
Baruchu Adonai Barach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'korbanim mikol hamim v'natanu et haTorah. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ופשט את בגדיו ולבש בגדים אחרים והוציא את הדשן אל מחוץ למחנה, אל מקום טהור, והאש על המזבח תוקד בו לא תכבה, וביער עליה הכהן עצים בבוקר, ברח עליה העולה והקטיר עליה חלבי השלמים, אש תמיד תוקד על מזבח לא תכבה. Sorry about that, I stole it.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. It's pretty handy, that guy.
Ya'amod. To be Israel. Ben Abraham. V'liba li'ashlishi.
Oh,
Baruch et Adonai haBarach.
Baruch
Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'korbanim mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. וזאת תורת המנחה הקרב אותה בני אהרון לפני אדוני על פני המזבח והרים ממנו בקומצו מסולת המנחה ומשמנה ואת כל הלבנה אשר על המנחה והקטיר המזבח ריח ניחוח אז קראת לאדוני ונותרת ממנה יאכלו אהרון ובניו מצות תאכל במקום קדוש בחצר אוהל מועד יאכלוה לא תאפה חמץ חלקם נתתי אותה מישי קודש קודשים היא כחטאת וכאשם כל זכר בבני אהרון יאכלנה חוק עולם לדורותיכם מאישי אדוני כל אשר ייגע בהם יקדש.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Is there someone who would like to lift the Torah? Gary, you want to do it? Okay. Anybody like to wrap the Torah? Joel, you want to wrap? Okay. Right there. You can put it right behind him. Yeah.
They're not ready.
Please write.
They'll be fine. Vezot haTorah asher sam Hashem lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Eitz chaim hi lemachas
מחזיקים בה ותומכי המאושר עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה תומכי המאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה
Does anybody have a El Male or a yahrzeit they would like to say? I would do an El Male for. Okay. David can continue.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו, הודו לארץ ושמיים, וירם קרן לעמו, תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל עם קרובו, הללויה לדוד מזמור. אדוני הארץ ומלואה, תבל ויושבה, כי הוא על ים יסדה, ויעל נהרות ירוניה, ויעלה בהר אדוני. נעשו בפני עולם ויבוא מלך הכבוד מי הוא זה מלך הכבוד אדוני זוז וגיבור אדוני גיבור מלחמה שאו שירים ראשיכם עשו בפני עולם ויבוא מלך הכבוד מי הוא זה מלך הכבוד אדוני צבאות מלך הכבוד סלה ובנוחו יום שוב אדוני רבו ישראל עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכי המאושר דרכי דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום השיבנו אליך ונשובה קדש ימינו כקדם. The old flip around. Chatzi Kaddish before the private Amidah. It's on page 222 in Lev Shalem. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועמד יבקרתי וימליך מלכותי, וחי יכול ויום יכול, וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רב מברך, לעולם ולעמי עלמיה, יברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, נמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. Please continue with the private Amidah at your own pace. We'll continue together with the repetition for Mincha on page 223 in Lev Shalem. כי שם אדוני קרב וגדולנו אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי לאה ואלוהי רחל האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ומביא גואל לבני בניהן למען שמו ביאהבה מלך חוזר ופוקד ומושיע מגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח מוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני העפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה מצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה מתים נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב היד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך על הארץ כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש אתה אחד ושמך אחד ומקרבך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ תפארת גדולה ועטרת ישועה יום מנוחה קדושה לעמך נתת אברהם יגל יצחק ירנן יעקב בניו ינוחו בו מנוחת אהבה נדבה מנוחת אמת ואמונה מנוחת שלום ושלווה והשקט ובטח מנוחה שלמה שאתה רוצה בה יכירו בניך וידעו כי מעידך היא מנוחתם ועל מנוחתם יקדישו את שמך אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו רצה במנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך סבנו מטובך ושמחנו משועתך ותאר ליבנו לעבדך באמת והנחילנו לאלוהינו באהבה ורצון שבת קודשך וינוחו בה ישראל מקדשי שמך ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת רצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל בתפילתם והשבת עבודה לדביר ביתך תפילתם מאהבה תקבל ברצון ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון מודים אנחנו לך שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ולא אבותינו לעולם ועד צור חיינו מגן אישנו אתה הוא לדור ודור נודה לך ונספר תלתך לחיינו מסורים ידיך ונשפטנו על פי גדולך ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו ועל נפלאותיך וטובתך שבועית בבוקר וצהריים הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך והמרחם כי לא תמו חסדיך מעולם קיווינו לך ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד וכל החיים ידעוך סלע ויעלו את שמך באמת על ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך לחנה להודות שלום רב הישראל עמך ועל כל יושבי תבל תשים לעולם כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום צדקתך צדק לעולם ותורתך האמת וצדקך אלוהים עד מרום אשר עשית גדולות אלוהים מחמוך צדקתך כהראל משפטך תהום רבה עדיו ומימה תושיע אדוני Hikadal v'ikadash shemei rabba v'yamad yivrach kirtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayedecho beYisrael b'galav v'zman kariv v'imru amen Yehi shemei rabba v'arach le'olam v'yamaya Yibarach v'ishtabach v'yitbar v'yitaman v'yinasei v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shemei kudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata jishbuchata v'nechamata Namiran mihalma v'imru amen Tidkabal zlodon v'avdeon decho Yisrael kodama v'honi v'ishmaya v'imru amen Yehi shalom rav min shemaya v'chayim alinu v'kol Yisrael v'imru amen Hoseh shalom b'imromav Hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al Yisrael v'imru amen Aleinu page 231 Aleinu shabeach ladon hakol letidgal tzivishit Kakatuba Toratech, Adonai Melech Olam Vaed, V'nemar v'yanoi lemelech kol haaretz, B'yom hahu Yanoi echad u'shmo echad. Mourner's Kaddish, page 232. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Amen. V'yalma divra kirtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabbah mevarach lalam l'mei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei de kudsha b'richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Amen. All right, friends, we're going to take a little break, get something to eat, and then we'll have some learning, some Midrash, next week's Midrash tonight, Purim edition. So on Zoom, you can get some food too, and we'll be back in, 5 to 10 minutes or so. Oh, thank you. Just tell everyone to start on page 2. Decided on it. Okay. What time's? Yeah. It's nice of you to extend the invitation, my friend. My You remember the day? Oh, it's nice. It was really nice. All right. All right. As folks wrap up getting their seconds, we're gonna get started in just a sec. Yeah, I'll just preface our learning tonight that I thought it'd be fun in the theme of next week's Midrash tonight. Wasn't so inspired by the next parsha. There wasn't any of the midrashim that really stuck out to me. So I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if we next week is also Purim? Why don't we focus on that? So we're gonna take a midrash from Esther Rabbah from the major midrashic compilation about the book of Esther, about the scroll of Esther, and sort of in a continuation of the themes, one of the things the midrash loves to do, especially when there are introductions of characters and names, is to take a look at how they're introduced and see what is in even the one line introduction of the said person or character. And one of the great midrashim actually goes many directions on this, but is based on the introduction of Mordechai, of kind of the quintessential. And lovely Tyball's got the good the Esther background just on the Zoom. And Esther we tend to think of as kind of the quintessential hero, at least from a rabbinic perspective, and the story itself seems to at least lend itself somewhat that Mordechai is one of the heroes. Certainly, there are also non-male heroes in the Megillah. So I'm going to pass these out, and I also gave you an kind of bonus midrash. I don't think we're going to touch on it tonight, but maybe over the course of the week or before Purim, take a look at the first page. We're going to start on the second page tonight, but the first page has a shorter, nice midrash about Mordechai and about what was so great about him beyond his acts in the story itself. Okay. Okay, so you can see the first page is not what we're going to focus on, but something to hold on to. We're going to start on page 2. So if you'll turn your page. So the introduction of Mordechai in the book of Esther starts with Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushan Habira Ushmo Mordechai. Right, there was a Judean man or man from Judea that was in Shushan, the citadel, and his name was Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish Ish Yamini. Right, it says that he was the son of Yair, son of Shimi, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. So this line is going to form the basis of the next 2 pages of Midrash, and it's going to kind of break it one piece at a time, as we've seen in some of our other Midrashim. So the first one is Ish, okay? We started with Ish Yehudi, first word of the verse. What does it mean that he's introduced as Ish? You wouldn't necessarily have to introduce him that way. Plenty of characters in the Tanakh are just introduced as their name without even saying there was a person so-and-so. So Ish teaches that Mordechai in his generation was equivalent of Moshe in his generation. As it is written about Moshe, and the man, V'ha'ish Moshe anav me'od, right? He was very humble. So about Moshe, it uses the word ish. And so too, ma Moshe amad beperetz, just as Moshe stood in the breach, whatever exactly that means, as it is written, he said he would destroy them were it not for Moses, his chosen one, who stood before him in the breach. So that's Psalm 106, kind of doing its own retelling of the Moses story. Also, Mordechai did likewise, right? It says about Mordechai, Doresh tov le'amo v'dover shalom l'chol zaro. Right? He sought good for all his people and spoke peace to all his descendants. Right? Ma Moshe limed Torah liYisrael. So we have 2 things so far that are similar about him. Both were mentioned with the word Ish, both Moshe and Mordechai. Both kind of stood in this moment of necessity, stood in the breach, which reminds me really of Shakespeare. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, Henry V, to kind of seize the moment and to fill the void of leadership. And so when it says that Mordechai did that, it's because it says in the Megillah that he sought good for his people, right? And he was a spokesman for peace. It doesn't use the word stepped into the breach, but that his actions showed that he was stepping up. He was stepping up in his time. And then the third element is teaching Torah. So it says, just as Moses taught Torah to Israel, as it is written, see, I have taught you statutes and ordinances. Also, Mordechai did so, as it is written, divrei shalom ve'emet, right? He spoke matters of peace and truth, right? So interpreting Mordechai's speaking these words of peace and truth, what else are words of peace and truth other than Torah, of course? And as it is written, and it gives a demonstration of that from Proverbs, which says, Emet kinei ve'al timkor, right? Acquire truth and do not sell it. And so bringing that Proverbs thing, it seems that in Proverbs it's much clearer that truth means Torah, right? That you acquire truth, you acquire wisdom, you acquire Torah, and you do not sell it. So too, when it talks about Mordechai speaking matters of peace and truth, it's about Torah. Okay, so what do we think so far about this idea of comparison of Mordechai with Moshe? What do you buy their comparison, and 2, what do you think the purpose of it is? Why did Mordechai need to be compared to someone other than himself? Yes, Irv.
Just why Zelensky is the hero in this week's Jewish journal.
Right.
Every generation needs to be a hero.
Right.
Mordechai clearly fits the hero role. Therefore,
Gotcha. That's great. So Irv summed it up really nicely and brought into the room what a lot of us are currently thinking about President Zelensky in Ukraine, who is serving as this heroic figure for our time. And so Zelensky had his own heroes in past times, and so too when we introduce this newer character, Mordecai, who I think also in the book kind of represents a new era. It's not exactly what you said, but I think I'll add to that. He had to have some kind of hero to look up to too, and Moshe is kind of that that peak hero, that hero that many of us are looking up to. Yes.
I agree with her, but I question whether hanging it on or
Yeah. Good. Good. So Tom's a little skeptical about how we could take this entire drash and hinge it on just the word ish, which seems like right, an ish or isha, right? Everyone's a person, a man or a woman. Yes. Hold on one second. Yes.
Well, I don't know that he's really the hero here. I mean, he was sort of on the sidelines telling Esther what to do. You go to the king. He might kill you because you weren't invited to go to the king.
Yeah.
But I mean, she did a lot more than he did. Not to denigrate what he
Not
did.
at all.
The real hero here was Esther, not Mordecai.
Okay, so Joel's saying that Mordecai was more the coach on the sidelines, right? The person in the game with skin in the game was Esther. She was the one who spoke up, and she was really the one who saved the day. So that Mordecai is a secondary character. It's a little unfair to just be waxing poetic just about Mordecai. Yes, Fran.
I'm also curious, it's just Ish as opposed to the story of Noah, where it was Noah, Ish, Sadiq.
Yeah, Ish Sadiq, yeah.
So it's not Ish, Sadiq,
Mm-hmm.
not Ish, or not
Right, exactly.
just
Yep, it's not Ish Chayil. He doesn't, you're right. So just having the word Ish to Fran seems like they could have easily added a descriptive element to add to Ish that would align with lots of other examples where it's very clear that those people are being described as great people. But Mordecai's just Ish. Ish isn't necessarily good, bad. He's just an Ish, just a dude. Okay, we're going to get there. Good. Okay, wait. Irv ran ahead and he said, wait a minute, he's defending Mordecai. We don't need to denigrate him. Oh, well, that's okay. A very controversial discussion happening right now. That perhaps Esther was the puppet of Mordecai. He was the puppet master. It's we can give them both credit, but very good. Tybal, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, I don't know if anybody said
Yeah, we can
either
hear
of
you.
these. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we actually can, and strangely
Oh,
enough.
okay. The first is that Ish, I think, doesn't necessarily mean it's not Ivri. It's not a Jewish man.
Right.
But Moshe and Mordecai could be linked because neither of them have Hebrew names.
Oh,
So their names become Hebrew name the same way Alexander the Great, much later became a Hebrew name because it gets used. But that would be another linkage because their name, the etymology of the names are not from Hebrew.
yeah, I love that. I right, that Moshe and Mordecai both have these names that are, in Moshe's case, probably Egyptian, and Mordecai might be connected to Marduk, Near Eastern god. So, a little uncomfortable, but we kind of see it in the name. And that's a really interesting point why they would specifically pull out Moshe. That might be another kind of inherent thing. I love that. Thank you, Tybal. All right, let's keep going. So we've kind of made this comparison, and we're not so sure 100% how we feel about just Ish. Does Ish imply Ish Gadol, Ish Gibor, Ish Chayil, whatever, all those things? Or is it just Ish? We shall see. We can make our assessment as we go along. Okay, so the next element, they kind of skip Haya B'Shushan Habira and go straight to Ushmo Mordechai. His name was Mordechai. Okay, so this is a really interesting drash. It says, Harishaim Kodmin Lishman, that the wicked precede their names. So when the wicked are spoken of, it says, for example, Naval was his name, right? Naval Shemo, Sheva ben Bichri Shemo. Sheva ben Bichri was his name. However, the righteous, their names precede them, actually meaning that the word, his name, precedes the person. And as it says, and his name was Manoach, Ushmo Manoach, Ushmo Kish, Ushmo Shaul, Ushmo Elkanah, Ushmo Boaz, Ushmo Mordechai. Right? So it's a really interesting thing. And I mean, I wonder if, somebody who had an encyclopedic knowledge of the Bible could say, oh, but what about this person? I really wondered if they were pushing it. But it is really interesting that they found two strong examples where somebody who's thought of as bad, at least as the Bible tells it, have their name actually first, as opposed to having this introduction of, and his name was such and such. I also think it's really, so just to kind of like give you an example of who these people are real quick, like Naval is this guy that wouldn't give any food to David in the wilderness when David was extorting him. I won't go there. Sheva ben Bichri is one of the people who rebelled against David. Manoach is the father of Shimshon, who is, I guess, is thought to be good because his son Shimshon, one of the judges, Samson, and his name was Kish. Kish is actually, you can see it in the introduction of Mordechai, son of Yair, son of Shimi, son of Kish. Kish is also Shaul, Saul's father. There's actually a really interesting literary thing about why Mordechai might be, why does it say Mordechai is descended from Kish and is a Benjaminite? There's kind of a linkage to Saul. We can talk about that later. Yes, Joel?
Well, we just read in the Haftorah today that Shaul made a big sin. He was
Yeah.
to kill all the Amalekites and all the sheep.
Yeah.
He let the king live, and God took his kingship away from him.
Right.
And yet he's now listed among the tzaddikim.
Yeah.
Righteous, which I think is a stretch.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's a really good point, right? That we said kind of Shaul screwed up, made a really big screw up, a couple really big screw ups, and the kingship was taken away from him, as the Tanakh tells it. But here we have his father as a tzaddik, and we have a few relatives of him as tzaddikim. I think there's something really interesting about that, in so much as Mordechai might be fulfilling Saul's Saul's potential that never got completed. There's kind of some stuff in the Megillah about they didn't take the booty. They didn't take any of the stuff when the Jews fought back, and that's actually opposite to what Shaul did in today's Haftorah, which is that he took the goats, he took the flock. So there's kind of like a fulfillment of what Shaul was supposed to be in Mordechai, which is kind of an interesting side note. It might be why they bring these things, why they bring Kish and all these relatives. So great. Moving on. And his name was Mordechai, Lefisha Domin Levoran. So what's the significance of saying Ushmo before their name? What does that matter? Fine, it's a nice pattern. It's because they are actually similar to their creator. As it is written in Exodus, Ushmi Adonai lo nodati lahem. So when God is introducing God's self to Moses, God says, and my name Adonai I did not reveal to them. I revealed my name to your ancestors by the name of El Shaddai, but I didn't reveal this Yud He Vav He name to them. And it uses Shmi before his name. So there's a godliness in this introduction, a comparison there, which I think is just really brilliant and fun and specific. Okay, any other thoughts about that? I think that's just kind of a good one. Not much to say about it. Okay, so the next element, so this is a really interesting thing because we have his introduction as Ish Yehudi, but then we also have his introduction as Ish Yemini. Okay, so the Midrash is going to have a little trouble with that because someone who is from Judea actually is not from Benjamin. Benjamin was a tribe just slightly north of Judea. Back when there were separate kingdoms, not everything was Judea. Judea was the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom was Israel with lots of different tribes, and Benjamin was above Judea. So how can you be both? That's the Midrashic problem. So what does it mean, Yehudi? Why do they call him Yehudi? Lama nikra shemo Yehudi? Why was he called a Judean? Was he Havalo Yeminihu? Wasn't he a Benjaminite? You can't be both. So it says he was Yehudi lefi sheyiched shemo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu keneged kol ba'eolam, because he unified the name of the Holy Blessed One before all creatures, right? And this is the element. This is what is written. How did he do that? Lo yichra velo yishtachaveh. He didn't bow down and he didn't prostrate himself to Haman. But then they say, okay, but you may have heard this before. What's wrong with bowing down to a king? In halakha, you're actually supposed to show respect to kings and presidents and authority figures for the sake of peace, and because they have kind of taken a piece of God's honor, and you're supposed to kind of just respect their role in your life. So why wouldn't he bow down to them? Was he contrary and violating the king's decree? Right? You're supposed to observe the law of the land. Rather, when Achashverosh commanded everyone to prostrate themselves to Haman, Haman carved an idol and set it over his heart, intending that they prostrate themselves to the idol. So the Midrash here is trying to solve a problem in the story, which is, it seems kind of weird. Like we always grow up saying, oh, he didn't bow down. He wanted everybody to bow. I don't know if you ever heard that song. Sorry, I had a flashback from day school. But there's nothing wrong with it. It's authority figures. So that they say, okay, he must have not bowed down for a better reason. And the better reason was that Haman had put this idol on his heart, and he was intending that it wasn't for them to bow down to him and his ego, but to really bow down to this idol that he's holding. So, I mean, this is kind of like, what do you think, Fran? Grasping.
Very frequently, monarchs have religious regalia that we don't believe in.
Right.
And so if Haman was doing that, and the Noah was to bow down, it wouldn't, I think, stop
Right. Stop him from doing that. Yeah.
doing that. So
Yeah, so that's really good. So Fran was saying, lots of monarchs have items of clothing or things around their neck that we might not want to bow down to, but we still are supposed to show them some kind of respect. So this kind of like inventing a story that's not in the text, this is the kind of thing that when I grew up, I thought this is what Midrash was, right? You just like write stories to like fill in the gaps. But we've seen some of the other ways of working within the Midrash are actually like getting really specific about what's there. And this is one where we actually have a problem with his behavior if we want him to be a hero, because we really could just see him as being a contrarian. Like, stop causing trouble for no reason to yourself and to Jewish people. Like, don't do that. That would actually be a non-heroic thing potentially in the rabbinic eye. Other thoughts on this? Here, let's go on a little bit more and let's see. So ukeshehaya ro'eh Haman she'ein Mordechai mishtachavelo nimalei chema, right? When Haman saw that Mordechai would not prostrate himself to him, he was filled with fury. Mordechai said to him, Yesh Adon Hamitkael Kol Hageim, right? There is a master who exalts over all the exalted. How can I forsake him and prostrate myself to an idol? So because he unified the name of the Holy One, blessed be he is called Yehudi, right? Which is to say, Yehudi means Yechidi. Okay, so there's kind of two elements to that. This is an example of the fact that he is showing the unity of God's name. He is unifying the name of God through these actions of righteousness and loyalty to God. so that we're reading it as that kind of unification, but we're also reading it as Yichidi, him alone did these things, right? So because he actually was the only one not bowing down, that actually shows that just because he was the only one doesn't mean he wasn't right. And so before we go on, there's this whole midrash kind of hinges on the idea that Yehudi is anything like Yichidi or Yiched, right? But it actually, we have the difference between a hey, like a ha, and a ch. And we also have the difference between, I think that's kind of the main problem, Yehudi, and also the difference between the vav and the yud. I think maybe the reason they can do that is a little bit because hey and chet maybe at the time weren't pronounced as differently as they are now. That they're both kind of supposed to be guttural, ha 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 ha, different types of ha's, and so it wasn't so far flung sounding as we think. And maybe also that the vav and the yud weren't always so different, were sometimes kind of interchangeable, like we see in the Torah. Sometimes the word he for she is with a vav, sometimes with a yud. So I don't know. That's the best guess, but it does feel a little stretchy to us if you know some Hebrew. But anyway, so we have this unification and him being singular in his actions, which might be seen as potentially not very heroic, but we want him to be heroic. V'yesh omrim shehaya shakul ke'Avraham b'doro. Right? There are some that say he was equivalent of Abraham in his generation. So we've already compared him to Moshe, and then we've said actually that in some way he was kind of singular in his actions. And now we say, okay, but actually maybe he was like even further back in our ancestors like Abraham. Just as Abraham allowed himself to be put in the fiery furnace and went about causing people to acknowledge the greatness of the Holy One, blessed be he, that is what is written, and the souls they had gotten in Haran. It's not loud enough.
It's not on anymore.
Oh, fun. So too, I guess I'm just loud. So too, Mordechai in his time, people acknowledged the greatness of the Holy One, blessed be he. That is what is written. Many of the peoples of the land became Jews as the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Okay, so let's break this down. First of all, it's referencing a story about Abraham that isn't in the Torah, but is a midrashic story that the rabbis kind of, take for granted, in the same way that a lot of people think the story of Abraham smashing his father's idols is in the Torah, but it's just a midrash that really took off, and so is important to a lot of people. But the idea that this was Nimrod, the king of Ur, where he was from, throwing him in the fiery furnace because he refused to acknowledge Nimrod as a god, and he was saved by God. And not only did he do that, he was known to be converting people, which is the interpretation of this verse, Ve'et hanefesh asher asu v'charan. Right? This is when Abraham is on his way to Canaan. It says that he took the souls that he acquired in Haran, where he was previously, and midrashically that's interpreted as converts. Probably in the Peshat it meant slaves, but in the midrash, the nefesh, the souls that he made, is making souls, is very preacherly. And so too, it says about Mordechai that many of the peoples converted because when they fought back, the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them when they were able to fight back against the decree. And so there's this, like, in both of their times, people are embracing Judaism, perhaps for different reasons, maybe a more friendly one for Avraham, a more scary one in the Megillah. And then it ends with Vayiched Shemo Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'Kidso. He again unified the name of the Holy Blessed One and sanctified it. Therefore, he is called Yehudi, as it is written, Ish Yehudi. Do not read it as Yehudi, but rather as Yichidi. So just to kind of tie it all back together, that there are a number of different ways that that this midrash is saying that he unified God's name and was loyal to God's name and showed it before lots of people. One of them was the not bowing down to Haman and the idea that Haman was wearing an idol. And the other one is that he was sort of involved in the process of showing people how great Judaism is and making converts, even though in the context it seems like it actually doesn't really have to do with Mordecai exactly, but maybe inadvertent, maybe through some of Mordecai's efforts to get Esther to act and to tell the king, this allowed people to embrace Judaism, and that is another kind of unification of God's name when you're sharing, the good news, as it were, of Adonai. Any thoughts about this midrash and how I don't know how it'll inform your Purim or how you might kind of push back against it? We kind of had our debate between people who were really pro Mordecai and people who were more skeptical about Mordecai and who's the real hero. After this midrash, does it change where you end up? You will never look at Mordecai the same again. Okay, good. So Brant says he's a much more important person than he ever imagined. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Excellent. So Brant's saying that this kind of placing him as a standout in his generation compared with Moses, compared with Abraham, the only one to not bow down is really puts him in this iconoclastic category in our midrash. Awesome. There you go. I don't know if he was half joking, but no, you're serious. Okay, good. Right. Yes, great. So Brand also highlights that they want you to say that Mordecai deserves our attention, deserves our focus. There is something actually really great about him, even if in the text you don't see every single element. We want you to look. We want you to see what is actually good about him. Yes. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So we have a few more supporters of Mordecai and this idea that he's like really connected to some of our greatest people. Yes, sir. Of course. Right. Oh yes, excellent. Wonderful. So Irv is drawing our attention both to the heroes in our story, to not just Mordecai, but to Esther, but also the fact that we have really amazing modern day heroes. In this case, specifically, in the name of Cesar Chavez. March 31st is a holiday named after him, so please do commemorate that and do something good for your community. Yes, Fran. Yep. 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 Secretary of State, or yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
That is a very important part. So the actions that Esther took were heroic and deserve our focus, but the only way to understand them in terms of the zeitgeist is to realize the important part that Mordecai played.
Right. Yeah. Great. So Fran's reminding us too, again, that we don't have to pick favorites. We don't have to say only one's a hero and one's not. Just like we have presidents who are great and have great cabinet members and both contribute a lot to society. So too we have with Mordecai and Esther, in that Mordecai, while Esther may have in some ways really pulled the trigger on a lot of important pieces of the story and deserves our attention, that Mordecai did have a kind of public relations campaign, or did these more public actions, both in the things mentioned in the Midrash and also in the way that he mourns upon hearing the decree in public, that both of them were able to really work together. And I do think that I also agree with Fran that we do have this praise heaped on Mordecai, and I didn't go through all of Esther Rabbah, but I don't think that there's actually as much of this kind of drashing about Esther and the discomfort with the female hero. We actually have to make sure that the male hero is even more heroic than we want him to be. So we do make these connections, but also there's a possibility that it actually is there, and if you want to dig into it, but there's also a good reason to be skeptical. I'll give it on both sides. Yes, Jason. Yes. Right. Yeah. Good. So this can be a frame for your Megillah listening, to kind of confirm or push against what we've learned, what we might think about each of them based on this learning. Yeah, Tom. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Awesome. So Tom says it'll really kind of pop, and the literary arrangement of it will, kind of show itself anew, hopefully, and give a little bit more drama. And also, this line is a line that traditionally the kahal says before the reader, right? So this is actually a line placed in our mouths, not just in the person who's skilled to read. So we're kind of, hopefully we'll be speaking these words and have some of these midrashic takes in our minds and our hearts, and we'll go from there. Thank you, everybody. Always good to learn with you. We will do Shira Malot. I don't think we have ventures, but we do have Sidurim, and it's got to be in there somewhere, right? Probably not. Great. Thanks for a little cynical over here. It is. Is it in Friday night? 87. Thank you, Jason. Someone want to lead us to ate bread? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Okay, great, Joel. Thanks. ושוב אדוני את שיבת ציון היינו ככל ממאז ימלא שחוק פינו ולשוננו רינה אז יאמרו הגויים הגדיל אדוני לעשות עמנו הגדיל אדוני לעשות עמנו היינו שמח. Should I guess? את שיביתי. It's already leading now. Zorim bedima perina yiksoru halo yelechu vacho no semeshe chazara mo yavo verina no se alumotav. Yishem Adonai Barach Metavid Olam. Baruch Eloheinu Shechanu Mishalav Tuvo Chayinu. Baruch Shema Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Hazan et HaOlam Kulo B'Tuvo V'chein V'chesed U'Rachamim Hu Noten Lechem Lechol Basar Ki Le'olam Chasto U'B'Tuvo HaGadol Tami lo chasar lanu ve'al yichsar lanu mazon leolam ba'ed ba'avur shemo agadol ki welzan and farnes la'kol u'metiv la'kol u'mechin mazon lechol briotav asher bara baruch atah Adonai hazan et hakol node lechad Adonai lo yishchol avadeinu etzem sheba Anybody particularly want to lead Mariv? Just throwing it out there. I'm happy to just. What? No, I'll do it. I'm having fun. We're going to continue with Huh? Okay, continue with Mariv, page 264. Please rise. ורחום יכפר אבל לא ישחית ורבה לשיבה בו לירקו חמתו אדוני יושיע מלך יעננו ויום קוראנו ברכו את אדוני מבורך ברוך אדוני מבורך לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בדברו אמרים דברים בחוכמתנו ושלום תכף מחלים את הזמנים וסודרים ושמות פרי יום לילה וגלים וכן שלוש ביום הוא מעביר יום ומביא לילה מבדיל בין יום ובין לילה אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני המרים והרבים אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת תורה מצוות חוקים ושבטים אתה למען תלכנו שוכרנו גמרנו שמח ונשמח כי ראינו ברך ימינו בהם נגיע יומם ולילה בת אחת עשרה ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך היו הדברים האלה שנוחים בזבח היום לבך ושנתן לבניך וברת בם שיבדך ובביתך ולתפקדך שוכב כמך שדם ליד ידיך ובוא בעיניך ודם על זבתך בשורך היה ימשוע ותשמע תצא שנה ויצא לבך ולבדו בכל בשכם ונתים בדאר יצחם ותגר ומקוש ועשת ונתים שכם צרם ובסך ונתך ואכלת וזבת שמר לכם בין ילד ובמזרתך ובתם ועלים אחרים משתך ודלה חרב עלי בכם וצער שמיים ליהם בדה Adonai Elohechem emet, ve'emunah kol zov v'yam aleinu ki hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ein zolot tov v'nachzir l'mo. Ha'potenu miyad melachim malkinu golenu mekar kol eretz yimel nifra l'anu mitzrayim l'mishkan l'mu l'ishna sinash. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה מרב בני ישראל לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך בלים אדוני מי כמוך נדב לקודש נורתי לא תוסף אלה מלכותך ראו בניך בוקר ים לפני משה זה אלי אנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי אדוני את יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גל ישראל השכיבנו לאלוהינו שלום עינינו מלכנו חיים וברוס עלינו זוכת שלומך ותקננו בעצה טובה לבניך ושירנו למען שלך בגם עדינו אשר מלאנו יום טוב וחדר ברב גם לסרסת ומלכנו קצר כנפך כאשר מצאנו מקים לך למחדה ושמור צאתנו ובונה לחיים שלום מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל עד page 268 ברוך אדוני לעולם אמן יאמן ברוך אדוני מצוין שכן נשכם עליהם ברוך אדוני כי המלכות שלך יום מעט ימלוך בכבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך בכבוד אתה מן ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ועל כל מעשיו. יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה, אמן. בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, וחיי חונים וימי חונים וחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה וזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. ישמי רב מברך לעולם ולעמל מיה יתברך וישתבח ויתבר ויתרמה ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה בריחו לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמינן בעלמה ואמרו amen. Private Whisper Amidah is on page 270. Please continue davening at your own pace. We'll continue together with Chatzi Kaddish, page 279. יקרא ויקרא שמי רבה, אמן, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וימי חון וחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רב מברך, לעולם המאמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתבר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, ואמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. וינו אמן אדוני אלוהינו עלינו, מעשה ידינו כל נעלינו, מעשה ידינו כל יושב בסדרים מצל שלהם. אומר אדוני מחשיב את צדדי עליהם תבוא כצלך מפח ינוש מדבר חבא במברת הרסך צילם וסוחר מתעלות יורה מפח לילה מחית יופי יום מדבר באופי הלך מקטב ישור צריים יפול מצלך לבר ומנך לך ויקו יש רב כנך תביא בשל מת יושבים דירה כתנאי מחשיב עליון זם במנך ג'נה לך רב נגל לקרב עליך כי מלך ותבל לשמורך בכל תרק כפיים מזוך לבן גבר שחר ונמוס כביר ותגיב יחשך לו ודאיוס כביר ישומי יקוני ביניהם לא נכי וצרח על זה Orech yamim must be over Yeshuati. Orech yamim must be over Yeshuati. Kaddish Shalem, page 280. Ikadal v'ikadash shemer Rabba, amen. V'yalmad divrak yurtei v'yamech malchutei v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. V'agalav izman kariv v'imro amen. Yehei shemer Rabba barach la'lam amaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitaman v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shemer kudsha b'richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiram b'alma v'imro amen titgabal tzlodon v'odon d'chol Yisrael kodam avoni v'shmaya v'imro amen Yehei shalom Rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imro amen Oseh shalom v'imro mav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imro amen Aleinu, page 21. Aleinu jabeach l'adon hakol latit glad sebershit. Shelo azan yeretz avol asam shelo sam chagin agor aleinu kovanam vanam. Yifnei melech v'chein lachim hakadosh baruch hu shmaya ככתוב בתורה תכונן למלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר ויונה למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Mortis Kaddish, page 282. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, אמן. בעלמא דברך קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון וחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיה לחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen. Okay, we're going to turn to Havdalah, page 283. Come close for sure. Oh, she's on. Okay. Okay. Come on, stay on there. Stay on there. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. הנה אל ישועתי אפתח ולא אחד כי עוזי וזמרת יד אדוני ויהי לי לישועה הושבתם מים וששון ממענה הישועה לאדוני הישועה על עמך ברכתך סלע, אדוני צבאות עמנו. Miskab lanu Elohe Yaakov Selah Adonai Tzevaot Hashrei Adam Boteach Bach Adonai Yoshia Hamelech Yaneinu V'yom Koreinu La Yehudim Hayta Ora V'simcha v'sason v'ikar ken tieh lanu koz Yeshua desa hu v'shem Adonai ekra hayanai Adonai hayanai Adonai Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei beri agafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lecho ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'amim ben yom hashvi'i l'sheshet yemei ha'maseh. Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lecho. Hamavdil ben kodesh lecho, chatoteinu yimcho, zareinu v'chasmeinu yarei yarech kachol, v'cha kochavim balayla. Zareinu v'chasmeinu yarei yarech kachol, v'cha kochavim balayla. Shavua tov, 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 Shavua tov. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishmi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi. Bimera v'yameinu Yavo Eleinu Mashiach ben David Mashiach ben David. Shavua Tov, everybody. Wonderful week. Chag Sameach. And great learning with everybody. Is it Kiddush Levana?
Oh.
If anyone
Just one announcement. Tomorrow morning, Minyan is still at the Grossman's house as the last morning of Shiva for Fran's mother. They're not here any longer, but it's at 8 a.m. And if you're able to be there, please do so. It will also be on Zoom. Shavua Tov, everyone.